Hi Will, how's it going? Hope you are staying in the tip-top condition.
Yeah, zero hope is right. I'm pretty well. What about you?
I'm really great today. Long time no see you in this virtual communication. What's new?
Certainly, I'm really glad to have today conversation with you because I'm going to invite you to review our previous material. Do you mind?
Wow, that's brilliant idea, Mila. Let's start it. What are you wait for?
Okay, you look very excited, so I'm getting more spirit. Before we started, um, but I was a little bit confused about our previous material, that is second language acquisition theories. Would you kind mentioning the five hypotheses?
Wow. Okay. Because in this opportunity, we are gonna review our reviews material, while then we are also discussing, right? Here I would like to
Yes.
mention the five hypotheses about the second language acquisition. So for the first hypothesis is about the acquisition learning distinction, and the second is the natural order hypothesis, and the third is the monitor hypothesis, and the fourth is the input of hypothesis, and the last is about the effective filter of hypothesis. So those are the four hypotheses in the second language acquisition.
Oh, I see. Then could you like to explain me the first hypothesis?
Okay, that's great, Aldrin. For the first hypothesis, acquisition learning distinction, where we are actually consider the first hypothesis is the basic among the four hypotheses itself, and also the learning acquisition learning distinction states that adults have two distinct and independent ways to develop their competence in second language. So for the first way is that the language acquisition. So this acquisition similar to or identical to the way children develop their ability in the first language. Because why I say so? Because this acquisition relate to the subconscious knowledge. So we are not actually realizing ourselves when we are exactly acquiring the language. And also, um, the result of the language acquisition is the acquired competence, where this becomes the subconscious learning also. Besides that, another way to describe the acquisition is including to implicit learning, informal learning, natural learning, and then in the non-technical side, the acquisition considered as the picking up. Yes, it is considered as picking up language. What does the picking up mean? It means that we are acquiring the complete knowledge, skills, or even the insight of the second language exactly. So we are underlying acquiring the second language. And then the second way to develop our competence in the language acquisition or the acquisition learning distinction is by language learning, where this learning is considered as conscious. Yes, as conscious learning. So when I said just now subconscious, so this is the conscious learning. So we are really uh, taking care of what the rules in speaking, either from the grammar, the pronunciation, the rules, and etc. So the second way to develop our competence in the second language is that in the learning itself, where we are really pay attention of the rules in the second language itself. So maybe Jazit about the learning the acquisition learning distinction.
Okay, it's a nice explanation, and I understand now. Now I remember that's actually the natural order hypothesis. So let me explain you.
Okay.
Okay. In this hypothesis, we acquire the rule of language in predictable order, and some of rules might come late, and some of rules might come earlier. And this hypothesis assumes, and you must remember that it just assumption. Okay, it assumes that there is a similarity to acquire first and second language. Even though we cannot conclude it for everyone who learns second language, and I think here the structure support our first language errors in learning second language can be avoided. That's why the grammatical structure of our target language is obtained in natural and the hypothesis. Okay, that's for me about the second hypothesis. Maybe you will continue to the third hypothesis.
Okay. So you have already explained about, or you have already reviewed about the second hypothesis of second language acquisition. So here I would like to explain about the third. The third is the monitor hypothesis. So, as well
Yes.
known, or as what we have studied before in our previous meeting, so while that the acquisition and the learning distinction claims that the two spirit processes consist causes in the adult. So just now I have already taught you about the way the adults acquiring the second language acquisition. So, the monitor hypothesis posits that acquisition and learning are used in the very specific time, and also the besides that the learning have one function. Yes, I mean, what does the one function mean? Means that uh, the learning has a monitor and or editor. Yes, monitor or editor.
Mm.
So here,
Yes.
the monitor hypothesis have some rules. Some rules in, and also it is considered as conscious learning. So for the first that we have to pay attention is about the time. So we don't have any enough time to think about how do we speak or how do we acquire the second language acquisition itself. And then the second is focus on form, where to use the monitor effectively, time is not enough, like what I had said the first time. Time is not enough because when we are speaking, of course we will not pay attention, or we will not think too much about what we are going to speak. So it is like spontaneously we talk, or we spontaneously speak the second language itself. And then the third is know the rule. So this is very formidable requirement, where we have to understand about the rules in speaking, other like the grammar, other from the pronunciation or the accent itself. So really we have to know the rule on how we speak the second language. And then from the monitor hypothesis also, is not it also consists of monitoring of ourselves, and then monitoring from another people. So for example, I'm monitoring myself on how I speak the second language, and then means that in the when I am speaking the second language, or I have to repair in this part, or in the grammar is wrong, etc. And then when another people is becoming the monitor, for example, Mila, you are become the monitor of what I am speaking right now. So you willy-nilly you have to correct my mistake, correct my speaking, even though we are in our discussion today. You are going to monitor and then correct my speaking. Oh, your speaking is better using like this. The grammar is better using something like that. So
Oh, okay.
also in the book that already given by our lecturer, so the first type is about the individual variation in monitor use, like what I have mentioned just now, and then the monitor over users, and the third is monitor under users, and the last is the optimal monitor user. So that's the kind of the monitor of hypothesis, the monitor hypothesis. So maybe
Okay.
you can tell me about the input hypothesis, the fourth hypothesis.
Okay, it's my time to tell you about the fourth hypothesis, that is input hypothesis. The which input hypothesis applies only to language acquisition and not to language learning. Possess the process that allows second language learner to move through the predictable sequence of the acquisition of grammatical structures predicted by natural order hypothesis. According to the input hypothesis, second language learner require a comprehensive input presented by I plus one to move from the current level acquisition, represented by I, to the next level of acquisition. Comprehensible input is input that contains a structure that is a little bit a little beyond the current understanding, with understanding defined as understanding of meaning rather than understanding of form of the language learner. Okay, that's a simple explanation from me. I hope you understand it.
Okay.
That's the four hypotheses.
Yes. So willy-nilly in acquiring the second language, we have to have the input on ourselves. Am I right to say that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you are right.
What about the last hypothesis? Do you still remember what I was saying just now?
I know. The last is affective filter hypothesis, right?
Yes, you are right. How?
How do you see that?
Okay.
How do you see that?
In my point of view, or so we are like having our own view about the effective filter
Yes.
of the hypothesis. So the effective filter of hypothesis states on how the effective factors relate to the second language acquisition process. So the effective filter is becoming the way on how we want to have a success acquisition exactly in the second language. As long as I remember, there are three categories on how the effect filters of hypothesis affect the second language acquisition. So for the first is about the motivation, and then the second is self-confidence, and the last is low anxiety. So we have to have uh, earn or we have to study it or pay attention on how we try to have high motivation in acquiring the second language, and self-confidence on how we can better our second language, and the last is we have to lower our anxiety in order we are not nervous, we are not afraid, we are not um, like shy to acquire or to speak the second language. So what about you? What's your view about the affective filters hypothesis?
Okay, also As long as I remember, this hypothesis says that a number of effective variables play a facilitative with no causal role in second language acquisition. These variables include motivation, self-confidence, anxiety, and a personal trait, like you mentioned just now. And Croissant claims that learning with high motivation, good self-image, and low level of anxiety and extroversion are better in acquiring the second language acquisition. On the contrary, low motivation, low self-esteem, anxiety, introversion, and inhibition can raise the affective filter and form a mental block to this language acquisition. Okay, that's all from me
Oh, that's right.
about the last hypothesis.
So, actually, from those hypotheses have the correlation and have the relation each other. Moreover, in the input and the effective filters, so we have to really care of the input and then care of the effective filters, because 2 points of the hypothesis really affecting our second language acquisition.
Yes, I think it's so.
Okay, maybe you haven't understood about our discussion. Have you understood about this?
Yes, I have. You have a nice explanation, and I understand well about those hypotheses.
Okay. Maybe we can end our discussion because I have another activity to be done.
Yes, and I hope we will have the next discussion.
Okay, I hope that too.
Okay. Okay, see you, Zakia.
See you, Tamila. Bye bye.
Okay, wassalamualaikum. Bye.